And that's obviously not how the intro was supposed to go, but welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Convert Show. Soundboard's being a little weird today, but we're back. It is Monday, May 27th, and it's Memorial Day. So, for all those that never came home, we offer our prayers to your families, we offer our prayers to you. But today we're going to do the show a little bit different. Usually it's me knocking on Ed's age and Ed becoming slightly offended by it. But we do have our first inaugural guest, and this guy
Not at
is
all.
recently retired as a cardiologist, spent 30 years in the medical field, and his life's work and primary interest has been in the area of women's health, reproductive medicine, and Humanae Vitae, which uh, it's going to be very interesting to hear what he has to say because you know John Paul II wrote the document. It's been kind of a point of contention for a lot of people who are either Catholic, anti-Catholic, or half Catholic. So it'd be very interesting to hear the good doctor's take. Now he's worked on and published over 100 medical papers on topics including the negative effects of the birth control pill, sterilization, and even condoms. He's well versed on what the church teaches about natural family planning and contraception. And his most recent paper came out on the book of Hebrews, and maybe he can get into that a little as we go along. But we're going to go ahead and welcome Dr. Dominic Pedulla to the stage.
Good morning.
Good morning, Doc. Good to have you on here.
Good to be here. Thank you for the honor of joining your program. I've known about you guys only for a short time, but I've really enjoyed your shows.
Hey, I'm glad to hear it. See, Ed, you were wrong. People have heard of us. It's not just my mom. No, so you know, you and I first spoke on a call last week, and one of the things that I asked you about, and maybe you could shed some light on here for the show, is what it's like to be a devout Catholic in the medical field, especially considering how there is a large swath of moral ambiguity where the means justifies the ends with a lot of medical professionals and doctors. So, in 30 years, obviously, you've been there, done that, seen it all, bought two T-shirts. What's been your experience with that?
Well, it's a really good question, Jeff. When I was going through training in New York City, I think there may have been 6 Catholic hospitals within the confines of the city itself, and they tore down the very last one about 8 years ago, St. Vincent's Hospital. There are no longer any Catholic hospitals in any part of New York City, which is a staggering thing to consider because, Catholic immigrants largely built New York City and built St. Patrick's Cathedral and all of those things. And for us to not even have a single Catholic hospital. But it's also the case that the Catholic hospitals that we have, um, they may not be so interested in the Catholic project at large with healthcare. It's more of a business thing. It has a Catholic name, maybe it has a saint's name attached to it. Um, but you will often find no physicians on the campus that a young family could find and attach to that freely espouse Catholic medicine, the virtue of Catholic medicine. Um, so it's the big problem, and many of them too, not just at the beginning of life, but at the end of life, present problems too, because the society we live in has become, as you know, utilitarian, and the doctor is now regarded as someone to make something happen for you that you want to happen, whether it's right or wrong. The doctor has the skills, and you just ask them to make something happen. And if it's to put you out of your misery before your time, then they ask doctors to do that. If it's to end preborn human life, they ask doctors to do that. And so, yeah, it's changed. It's changed in a dramatic way since I've been a physician.
Yeah. Now, were you ever faced with any situations where maybe, and I don't want to say canceled, but perhaps kind of blackballed or regarded as the black sheep among any of your peers for um, refusing to deviate from or deviate into anything that would go against your faith as a Catholic?
Right. Right. It was a little different for me because becoming a cardiologist, if I had become an OBGYN, I originally wanted to do that as a Catholic. I thought I could really help the church being a Catholic OBGYN. But when I was in medical school, I could not find a single Catholic mentor that was in that field that I could look up to and I could imitate. And so, that's a big thing in medicine, being able to emulate someone who's gone ahead of you. And since I couldn't find that, I ended up going into cardiology. But in my experiences in cardiology, you know, bumping up against the utilitarian doctrine in society is mostly at the end of life issues. So I did encounter quite a few situations where I was, you might say, disregarded or blackballed or whatever, um, because all I wanted to do is help someone or save a life or that kind of thing. And there were people, significant people in the room that didn't want that. They wanted the opposite.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of because a lot of people don't know this, but almost 20 years ago, I was in the medical field as a licensed nurse technician, and I worked on a lot of end of life units, whether they be in geriatric care, nursing homes that matter, ICUs, things like that. And hospice care was one of the things that I saw, not personally witnessed, but I did see that there was a kind of a standardized practice. It wasn't technically euthanasia, but in name, but it was, oh, this person is suffering. We're just going to continue to give them morphine, and eventually they'll just fall asleep and not wake up because there's nothing more they can do. Keep them comfortable. Now, obviously, I do not have the medical experience that you have, but something about that always seemed to me to be kind of a quiet euthanasia.
Well, that's because that's what happens with hospice. So, and let me caution you, whenever I say this, there's going to be some person emailing me or texting me or something saying, I had a beautiful experience with hospice with my loved one and my father, and he passed peacefully. And Jeff, there are some situations where that happens. There are some good hospice organizations, but for the most part, hospice makes their money saving the federal government money. So if you have colon cancer and a reasonable life expectancy of about 6 weeks, um, the government knows that it spends the bulk of its healthcare costs in the last 6 weeks of life. So they send you home on hospice. Now, you ought to be able to last 6 weeks. But if you look at the median survival on hospice in those situations, it's 6 days. So the hospice patient dies prematurely in most cases. Now, you can't die prematurely of cancer. What you die prematurely of cancer is you don't die from the illness. You die from being starved to death and not getting enough fluid. So you are denied your basic needs, and then you'll die in just a few days. And that's the experience with hospice. It's and again, are there some people who have a good experience with hospice? Yes. And can Catholics sometimes navigate the hospice experience? Well, yes, but you have to be very, very forthright with the hospice providers that at no time are they to neglect basic needs. And they often, the default position is to neglect nutrition and hydration unless pushed. And sometimes you have to push very aggressively. Um, I learned how to handle that. No one taught me how to navigate my way through these things. I had to learn it the hard way when I was in practice, and there's ways to do it, but you have to make sure that you take that you take control of the basic needs and leave the other things like narcotics for pain control, it's some anti-anxiety medicine, let's say. All those things you leave to hospice, but then you take care of the other things, and that can work out all right. But someone has to be in control of that because it will be neglected otherwise.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you originally wanted to be, get into um, the OBGYN field, but you couldn't find a mentor. Is that what led you down where you went with your, I don't want to call it side work, but
It
your
was
extracurricular work
right, right.
into contraception and women's health?
Right. I felt that as a Catholic doctor, I should really be able to. I should really be able. Pope Paul VI says in Humanae Vitae, he says that couples have the right, or that patients have the right, to expect wise counsel from their physician. And I always thought that it was my obligation to try to provide that. And so I had to know. I had to know the arguments that the contraceptive providers used when they approached women. I had to know those arguments better than they did and be able to show the flaws of all that. Now, that was like I'm really a 20-year study, to be honest, of the pill. And we had a nice paper on tubal ligation, and some other papers, but showing that when it comes to the healthcare of women in particular, contraception and sterilization can deeply wound a woman at the deepest part of her nature. Not or and I have sometimes I'll have people say, "Oh, you didn't say anything about men." Well, it's true. You can only concentrate on one thing at a time sometimes, but as far as the partner that really loses out, it's the woman, because it's her nature that it's called upon to nurture, right? And it's not inside a man's body that a new human being is conceived. That happens inside a woman's body. So the I wanted to be able to sort of, if you will, rope couples in sometimes when they came my way, and rope them into a different way of thinking, because basically 97, 98, 99% of childbearing age couples in our culture are practicing contraception when they're sexually. I mean, that's just what's going on. And even in our church community, it's not very different. But it's important to remember that those people are largely doing this in complete ignorance and complete propaganda from the medical profession. And my profession, we're in the process of losing my profession entirely. We've become uh, we've become the conformist slaves to the dominant culture. Our job, it seems, is to make the consequences be okay for every kind of behavior that people want to engage in, and that's not really the job of a physician at all.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, when I was bringing you on, John Paul II's doctrine of the what was it, theology of the body.
Theology of
You
the
know,
body.
yeah, he touched on this as well, and in my opinion, it was kind of an attempt to clarify Humanae Vitae, um, at least kind of bring it into a more modern uh, vernacular, as it were, because everybody knows Catholic speak is, might as well be Latin. But
Mhm.
what kind of pushback have you gotten? Because you've published over 100 medical journals in
Well,
this line of work.
right. But I did publish a lot of things, but they weren't necessarily in mainstream medical journals. Now, I did have some major publications, though. We published in 2007 in the Journal of Reproductive Medicine. Almost every study, Jeff, that had looked at the experience of women after tubal ligation was reported that in the area of conjugal functioning, sexual functioning, the woman was much better off after the tubal ligation. And I knew from my practice that wasn't true. And so we found some data that could speak to it that everybody accepted, and it just turned out that one of the variables studied was the whether or not a woman had had a tubal sterilization. And we found off the chart level of sexual dysfunction. Um, and what was happening was the dominant culture in medicine never suspects that these things aren't going to work out. They just have a uniformly rosy and optimistic picture that's unrealistic. And so they just simply ask women in the studies, what do you think? How has your intimate life been after you had the tubal ligation? Was that a good decision? 99% of them, when you approach them that way, they're going to say yes. Oh, it's the best thing I ever did. I mean, to not have a fear of unwanted pregnancies, yada yada, and all that. But the truth was something different. The truth is they were struggling, and it was as a result, probably, of the tubal ligation and the emotional consequences that happened from that. Because it's as if a man said, "Here, I don't want to deal with you as you. I want to deal with a facsimile version of you, and I don't want this hang up that comes along with you. I don't want the baggage of fertility that comes along with you. I just want my apparatus. The woman as apparatus." So again, that may seem a little crude, but Philip Machine said that. He said most modern men are not looking for a partner; they're looking for an apparatus. And I'd always thought that was true. I wish, Jeff, that I had been in a situation to have done a lot more studies, but I was, trying to raise 9 kids and doing the whole thing and trying to run a cardiology practice. But God gave me here and there, some beautiful little gems of an opportunity.
Yeah. Now, you became a cardiologist probably a decade or two after the beginnings of the sexual revolution, as it were.
Right.
When we started, well, maybe more than that. My timeline's a little off.
Not
But
too far. About 15 years.
what
Yeah.
was the process that you? Okay, 15 years. So, what was the process of escalation that you saw while you were in the medical field observing these changes when contraception, over the counter contraception, whether it was the birth control pills, I mean, because obviously condoms that, were used for centuries, a millennia, various forms. Um, but as birth control, as a means of contraception, and even abortion itself, uh, became more and more mainstream, especially in the medical community. What was it like witnessing that progression?
Well, in my time of practice, I've seen it go from um, the contraceptionists feeling like they have to explain themselves and having to present their way of care as something that is on a par with ours, to now completely disregarding the authentic way of care and starting to make the arguments that no one should have a conscience exemption from contraception and abortion. They are actually, I think it's the American College of OBGYN. They lied to us in 1975 or was 73 maybe, when they redefined pregnancy. Because of abortifacient things like IUDs, intrauterine devices, and those kinds of things, which was strongly suspected to kill off embryos early on, they had to redefine pregnancy to start with implantation. So, that means that the whole first 6 to 9 days of the fetus has been canceled out, and it's considered that the pregnancy only started in the womb. Um, but now, because like with any bully, if you don't fight back and you don't try at some point to punch them in the nose, they eventually take over. So now they're telling doctors, you don't have a right to dissent from this view. If a woman asks for this or asks for that, you have the obligation to provide it. And this is where, maybe we'll come to regret our silence a little bit, as Catholic medicine, let's say. We've been too, you'll notice a lot of the objections don't come from medical doctors. They come from lay people. They come from, people that are pro-life. There's a pro-life movement that's mostly lay people, in that sense. But Yes, it's changed, and it's becoming a much more totalitarian. If you don't present your teenage daughter for what they call a LARC, a long-acting reversible contraceptive, you're irresponsible. She could get pregnant, and then she'd have an unwanted pregnancy. This is the way doctors talk now. It's crazy, but it's what happens.
To me, it just seems like, oh, your daughter may end up pregnant, like as if that's some kind of a default of the human condition.
Right,
Your underage daughter may just end up pregnant, as if it's a foregone conclusion that, oh, well, she's a teenage girl. She's going to be sexually active, as if they take zero consideration into the way their parents um, are raising their children. I've
right.
got 9 kids. My oldest is 25. My youngest is 9. I have got zero grandchildren. My sons are waiting until marriage.
Right.
So I don't understand why that would be a default. It's almost pessimistic. I don't know. Like,
No, it
Ed,
is.
you have a grown daughter who just got married um fairly recently. I'm very curious onto your take on all this because my daughter's 11. I'm behind you in the curve on this.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's interesting. It's if you look back, actually, my daughter is of an age where she was say 11 or 12 when the HPV vaccination came out. And I'm here in New Jersey, at least, they were going to be requiring that of kids in middle school because again, you've got that assumption if you have it doesn't matter, a son or a daughter who is of teenage years, they are going to be sexually active. So it takes so much away from your parenting uh, and from the way that you're raising your children. And so
True.
I you know what I mean? It's just it's ridiculous. It's this whole idea. I mean, you look at what goes on in this world. I don't buy Girl Scout cookies anymore because the Girl Scouts, in at least in the area where I live, they have Planned Parenthood come in and talk to these
Yeah.
little girls about
Yeah.
what to do if they become pregnant. It's just this, like you're saying, it's there's this default position now where children, once they reach a certain age, are going to be sexually active and they're going to become pregnant. And I think
Mhm.
that's we do such a disservice to our children, to our society. Um, my we didn't we fought it. We didn't get that vaccination for my daughter. We said she's 13. She's not sexually active. She's not going to be for another 7, 8, 9 years.
Mhm.
Um, and luckily they gave us there was a little bit of period of time when the law was first put in place where you were able to make a decision. I think now you're not allowed to make a decision. I think the decision is made for you. Um,
Mm.
but it's just it's crazy. Like I say, it's just it doesn't say a lot about us as a society.
Well, if I may, Jeff, just say something. Ed is 100% right, and in singling out the Gardasil, you know, I don't know if you guys are too young to remember when AIDS first hit. It was about 1980, and there was sometimes at the beginning of that time.
We are
Uh,
not too young.
I'm giving you too much credit, am I, for being too young?
Definitely you're giving Ed too much credit.
Well, you know,
No, I am substantially older than Jeff. Substantially.
uh, my familiarity with Anthony Fauci did not start with COVID. Mine started with HIV because in the 80s, Fauci told medical doctors, you must not ask about the risk behavior. You must not ask what type of intimate activities this man, let's say, has engaged in because of the stigma. And so now the reason why, so that they the medical profession actually thinks in a perverse way that they are protecting the needs of Ed's 13-year-old daughter, and I have had the same thing with my daughters. Um, thinks that they're protecting their needs by removing any stigma whatsoever to discuss this area of human functioning that is so private and so sacred. The medicine is sort of on crack right now. It's kind of like the medical profession is spinning around, the sink, circling the drain. It doesn't have much left to just kind of go right down the drain. But our job is not. Our job is to counsel. Um, I'll just. This seems to be a popular topic, so let's talk about just for a second, if it's okay, the condom. Can we talk about that?
Hey, you're the
So,
guest. Roll into it.
So you would be surprised, unless you have been told this by someone, that serious researchers at the University of Pennsylvania have studied the condom and have found that there is a 4 to 5 times increase in breast cancer among women who have used that device. Um, it's known that biologically the male contribution contributes to women's health. And if you're in a conjugal relationship, just recently married and starting to move towards having a child, let's say, well, the woman's body has to begin to become prepared for childbirth. Nature isn't just going to throw her into that without any preparation on a biochemical and biological basis. Then condoms also cause preeclampsia. So when the male immune response is not present in the encounter, let's put it that way. I'm going to try to talk a little discreetly. But let's say that the male biological component, the liquids and the proteins and prostaglandins, are not present. The woman's body does not have a chance to prepare for the male antigens because a child, an embryo, is what's called in biological terms a semi-allograft. The child is half, antigens from the father and half from the mother, and the antigens from the father, the mother's body normally would react against. And so when there's no immune adaptation that takes place, then the woman's immune response sees those male antigens and reacts fully. And that's what preeclampsia is. And even that can progress to eclampsia, a sometimes fatal disease late in pregnancy that afflicts the third world nations. It's the number one cause of neonatal mortality, and it's 40% caused by the condoms at least. And what do? We keep handing out condoms because we tell women in third world countries, you'll have a good experience if you just stop having pregnancies. Not, you can have the pregnancies and we'll help you stay healthy and we'll help you deliver a healthy child. And no, you don't have to have the pregnancies. Why do you want to have pregnancies anyway and raise a child in this dreadful third world country of yours that has no resources? And this is kind of where we're at today. Medicine sort of doing the opposite of what it ought to be doing.
Well, when I see there's, those kind of arguments, why would you want to bring a child into a family when, okay, let's use myself as an example. I've got 9 kids. Let's say I was, you know, in deep and severe poverty. I'm living in squalor, barely able to take care of the kids that I have. It would be a negative thing to bring in another child, right?
It
It would
could
not be in any way, shape, or form a good thing for the other children that are already struggling with limited resources, as well as for my wife and I. Now,
right.
and this just kind of came to me while you were speaking. There's this kind of a leapfrogging over the other options, which one, simple enough, is the act of self denial,
Hmm.
not acting on these urges, right? And I
Right.
really don't think that humans are given enough credit as far as, well, they're animals. They'll just, you know. they go into heat and they start getting animalistic. They don't give humans and their level and capability for discernment enough credit by not even mentioning that. But then there's also something else that you are well versed in, which is the whole natural family planning, where you can still be intimate with your wife. And I know NFP has gotten some misconceived kind of notions about it because it's this weird kind of a wiggle line, at least the way that I understand it. Well, it's technically not, you know, coitus interruptus because it's definitely not happening, but it's also technically not an act of contraception unless the intent is present to just simply avoid having kids for the sake of avoid having kids. That's when it falls into sin. Now, if the intent is to avoid having kids because it would lead to a higher level of poverty or to lead to something along the lines of a um, some sort of negative result, whether that's again through poverty, through health issues, things like that, then there is that one missing component, which is the intention of let's just do it so we don't have kids. Right.
Right.
So that's that wiggly, weird kind of a area that falls into NFP. Why do you think NFP isn't pushed enough? Especially in situations where people have like, all right, I've got 14 kids. I don't need any more.
Right. You mean within the church?
Well, not just within the church, but within the secular world too. Why is that
Mm,
not a more mainstream option? You know, the
mm.
science works, and no matter how many times people will say that the Catholic Church and science are incompatible.
You know, the Billings, Dr. Lynn Billings, and John Billings, her husband, um, developed one of the major schools of natural family planning called the Billings ovulation method. And they did that very same project. They went into poor countries in Africa and they showed that that natural family planning not only works, but poor people uh, have the highest success rate in being able to avoid a pregnancy, and they are much more able to use the method than the and many of them uneducated, by the way, and they're more able to succeed at the method than our Western countries where everyone is highly educated and in a higher socioeconomic category. So the Billings found out that, and another thing they found out was that we're always told that unplanned pregnancies lead to abortion. Well, with Billings found out that when you use a natural method, you sometimes get pregnant even though you didn't intend to. But it much more uncommonly leads the couple to think about abortion than the case when you're using contraceptives. So the couple using a natural method of periodic continence, fertility regulation, abstinence, will are known not to be tempted to have an induced abortion, and so that sets them apart very distinctly from those couples that use contraceptives in poor countries. Um, they're sort of inviting a whole cultural change and a whole market change in the way people make their decisions. But you're right. You're right. I think of all people, the totalitarian government of China, the people's, what do they call it? The people's, um, they actually did try, I think, the Billings ovulation method because they found that their one child policy and the strict enforcement of intrauterine devices and those kinds of things was not working. And they tried the Billings ovulation method and they got improved results. So Billings was a genius. It's an international method. It works very well. But the basic question you asked, I'm not sure how to answer it. It's a bit of a mystery. Why not? Why don't they? It's easy to say it's money, but I think it's a basic corruption of if you're not living according to any sexual mores, you don't want me to live according to them either. Because if I'm living to them, that makes your way of life maybe not look so great, and so forth.
I think also, Jeff, it's a matter of people thinking or seeing that as an
Yeah, that makes
intrusion
sense.
of the government into
Go ahead.
their bedroom. I was going to say some people see it as an intrusion of the government into their bedroom, telling me when, where, and how I'm going to, be with my partner. So, and nobody wants to hear that. So I think that's a big part of the problem. Whereas when you're talking about contraception that's offered, especially now being offered over the counter, everything with condoms and birth control and things like that,
Mhm.
even the morning after and everything, it's I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it with whoever I want, whenever I want. Um, and then if I don't like the outcome, I'm going to take care of it in whatever manner I want to. No religious group's going to tell me how to live. No government is going to tell me how to live. I think that's a big part of the issue right there.
Now we studied a few summers back. I hired an intern to just gather some data, and we did our own study of countries that have made abortion legal. And we found out that there's not a single country that made abortion legal, uh, or put it the other way, there's not a single country that embraced contraception that didn't later embrace abortion. So the only countries that don't embrace abortion are countries that are not practicing contraceptives at a high rate. So if you manage to find a place on this globe that they're not using contraceptives, chances are you will not have an abortion issue either.
Now, there's a correlation I never would have expected, but I guess it makes sense. Um, it kind of slides into that whole slippery slope fallacy, right? Where if you start allowing this, or not allowing's the wrong word, but start condoning and celebrating this liberalization of sexual activity, where there are uh, almost no permanent consequences for the most part about anything because everything is temporary. Everything is, oh, well, it's optional. You can just take this pill, you can wear this thing, you can use this whatever, or, or doesn't work out. You just go to this clinic and then boom, the consequences of your sexual activity are gone. I
Mm.
can see how that would escalate. Well, hey, we've been using these pills and methods and devices, and then all of a sudden, if they don't work, it doesn't stop there. What's the next step? Well, that becomes abortion. So I can
Yeah.
see why the countries that you're referencing here would not have such a high abortion rate because they haven't started going down that slope yet.
But here's a strange oddity, Jeff, and the whole thing. The countries that had the highest per capita abortion rate in the world also have the lowest number of pregnancies in the world. So, looking at Western, well-developed, rich Western countries, they have among the fewest pregnancies in the world, but they abort 50% of their pregnancies. Countries like Zambia um, have far greater numbers of pregnancy per capita, and the abortion rate per pregnancy is way, way, way low compared to those other countries. So I think there's something diabolical about contraception that we have not fully. There's something insidious about it that the early Guttmacher people stumbled upon something that they could destroy society with, and I think they stumbled upon some diabolical intelligence. Think about it this way: conjugal relations between a man and a woman are not just about producing a pregnancy, right? They are about helping both man and woman to become parents. So, in other words, nature doesn't have a good investment in producing pregnancies without laying the groundwork for good mothers and fathers. So, the conjugal act, and since it becomes more of a woman's nature to have a human being living inside of her, it's really the mother that undergoes a change during normative conjugal relations, so that the fluid, the prostaglandin and hormones in the male's body, the immunological effects, they all go inside a woman's body and they help get her ready to become a mother. The prolactin that is in semen helps them. That has no role at all in a man's body, no function whatsoever. It's there so that the woman can begin to get ready to nurture a child, should that happen. Now, at the level of operant conditioning in psychology, and this is a little bit theoretical here, I'm going to try to not make it too complex, but nature has joined together the great good of the conjugal bond between the man and woman, and the idea of starting to think about becoming a mother with this man. And so nature lays the groundwork. This is actually a psychosexual stage of development for the woman, for the man too, but I don't know as much about that. I know more about the woman's aspect. The psychosexual development, we have psychosexual stages for everything in life, right? We have the child before he walks, we have then child discovers his own identity at age, somewhere in the second year. We don't do that for conjugal relations, and we should. And if we did do it, we would discover that in nature, the bonding of the conjugal union makes a mother. It makes a pre-mother. It makes a receptive mother. Conjugal relating makes an anti-mother. Conjugal relating means that that woman has to pack away her baby-making function and attack it, savage it, destroy it. It's the enemy of her bonding to that man. If she could bond to that man and still keep her fertility intact, meaning it's not a condition of their relating to each other that she packed that fertility away, she could be full, she could bring her entire womanhood to this scene, right? And as nature wants her to, because nature does not have an investment in making ill-prepared children. Nature wants the mother ready. Nature wants that child to thrive, right? So we don't have enough time to talk about it, but we're making anti-mothers. The contraceptive, you're not hearing this because everybody's concerned about population explosion. There are many countries now where the birth rate is under 1 now. It's pushing under 1. We're not only any longer not even talking about replacement level, we're talking about the vanishing of the human race. Okay? We're not talking about a phased in gradual, Winters and Teitelbaum, the demographers from Harvard, talk about it. They talk about the end of human life. And there was that movie a few years ago. Did you guys ever see it, where there was one woman left who could conceive? I don't know if you're, what's the actor? I like him. He's very good. But it was a movie all about a dystopian future day
Oh,
when,
that was Children of Men with Clive
there you
Owens.
go. There you go. Yeah. At the time I first watched that, guys, I thought that was far-fetched beyond belief. And after my experiences this last 15 years or so, I went back and watched it again, and I didn't find it far-fetched at all. We're talking about a day when the human race could vanish from the planet, and not because of some nuclear bomb or something like that. It would vanish because of our stupidity and because of our depravity and our perverseness. Um, Obviously, we're Catholics. We know that Jesus will win the victory. We know that. But I'm saying from a pure cultural, biological. So the conjugal relationship is meant to make a mother out of a mere woman. She was a woman before, maybe a potential mother, and now she's going to be sort of a, how they say marriage preparation has a remote and proximate preparation in the church. The remote preparation is when you're a child, your parents teach you how to relate to a person of the opposite sex, and they teach you the 10 Commandments. And then later on, you have the proximate preparation, which is you get with the priest and he teaches you all about marriage. There's something like that is going on in conjugal relating also. That's why women in our society are not happy by and large. Not supposed to say that, I guess, but all of the studies show it. All of the early pill studies, the Royal College of General Practitioners, the Walnut Creek study, the Oxford FBA study, all of them showed epidemic levels of suicidality and violence and accidents among women, just on account of taking the pill. Now, obviously, that has to all be unpacked, and it's not a proven fact, it's a theory, but I think that Satan is diabolically clever, and he gave us a way for us to destroy our own human race. He gave us a way for us to destroy. If we're in a society where mothers hate their own children, again, maybe hate's too strong a word. What I'm saying is that they may not even consciously think any of those things. They intend to love their child, but they're fighting themselves because the deeply organic psychosexual training of the relating part of it turns them against the possibility of a child.
I think that part of the problem is, and you talk about Satan, I think that Satan has kind of redefined certain terminology for us, and he's redefined certain words, and one of those words is freedom, because the definition that we have for freedom today is not the same that our founding fathers had, and
No.
so many people today think freedom means having as many sexual partners as you want without any care. Freedom means not getting married. Freedom means using abortifactants. Freedom means getting abortion.
Right.
Freedom means taking the pill. Freedom means I am me. I am the most important thing in the world. I'm the only thing I need to care about. That's what freedom is, and I think that's what's going on here. We've perverted look at the, I mean, they call abortion now. They don't call it abortion. They call it reproductive freedom.
Right.
Everything is they have taken that word and they've turned it into, in my mind, something very negative.
Right. Right. No question about it, Ed. I agree. And you know, it's there's a passage, I think it's Romans, at the end of Romans 1. It talks about exchanging the truth for a lie, and it talks about certain types of depravities, and then it talks about and God gave them up to it, and they took what is how does it go? They suffered in their own bodies the consequences, right? So it's we're going through that again, Ed, and it seems like we have to always reinvent, don't we? It seems like we can never learn from historical mistakes, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's true. I like that you say that we don't learn from history. We've we have a real problem with learning from history. And what do they say? Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Correct. And I think that we
Absolutely.
are we are right there. We are at that position now in our culture.
Well, if you want sometime, just a suggestion. I know this is drawing to a little bit of a close, but we could have one day a chat just about Humanae Vitae if you wanted to. Just a whole like beginning to end. We sort of covered the world, right? We covered everything.
Yeah, this was kind of a crash course into the world of Dr. Padula. I do want to go back just a little bit, and I'm already making plans to have you come on again to discuss this further. We've only
Right.
got about 10, 11 minutes left in the show. But earlier you were mentioning that the stage of the pre-mother in the psychosexual stage, it's dependent upon the bond of the potential mother to the potential father.
That's
Now, I've
right.
got a good friend of mine that specializes. He's a very successful um, former family therapist, and he specializes in attachment theory. And one of the things that he discusses quite a bit as one of the biggest plagues on people who are struggling in most modern relationships is that they aren't establishing an oxytocin bond. Is that what you're referring to?
Absolutely. It's all about attachment. That one is supposed to. Haven't you guys who've been fortunate enough to see your wives react to a newborn baby when she gets to see the baby for the first time? You all know that look. And I delivered some of my children in the parking lot of the hospital, so I was I I've seen that look too. But if you're right, it's all about attachment because God does not nature. God created nature in such a way that He did not want to leave us the chance. Do you know the human race would have died off long ago if He had simply said to us, "Be fruitful and multiply," but not given us and an enticing or attractive way to go about the business of populating the earth, right? If he left it just to our discretion, the human race would have been. So he's packed all these things in to what a family is supposed to be, what a spouse, what a couple is supposed to be, married couple, and how they are prepared. So I firmly believe that it's about attachment, like you said. When the mother, before there's even a child, the mother is romantically thinking about, what if I could be a mother? What if there could be a child? What if I could have a child with this man? What if, all these what ifs, they're even portrayed in the modern culture that we live in, TV, movies, and these hand-wringing decisions people make when they first find out their pregnancy test is positive. But I believe there's a whole foregoing transcript that goes on in a woman's mind, some of it conscious, some of it unconscious. Um, Teresa Benedek was a famous 20th century Hungarian psychologist. And she said that for women in particular, the procreative function is associated with a signal anxiety, meaning the procreative function in a woman has psychic implications that we have no idea as men that go on in her mind. And it would make sense because her role is, you could say her role is the most important of the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Well, I think that you're right. It's about attachment, and it's about in the devil came up with an idea for a perverse anti-attachment mechanism whereby we could get these ladies to all practice contraception, and they would come to see their potential as a mother as something dreadful and loathsome and fearful. And then from there, the child becomes dreadful and loathsome and fearful. And the child becomes the enemy of everything. And of course, in nature, it's not intended to be that way. It's intended to be that, and all of this. Some people misunderstand when I say this. They say, "Oh, well, you think a woman's constantly thinking about becoming a mother?" No, I didn't say that. Much of it is unconscious, but it is a psychosexual stage with operant conditioning, because the joy of connecting with the man is tightly bound to the unconscious possibility of becoming a mother, which is part of a woman's identity, not a man's identity. No man can see. Well, I can't believe I'm saying this. I was about to say no man conceives a child inside of him, but let's just add the adverb normally. Okay, normally no man conceives a child inside of him, so it's not part of a man's identity; it's part of a woman's identity.
Yeah. Um, you know, I think about the different aspects of, I got to deliver my own daughter 11 years ago. That was an experience I'll never forget.
Beautiful,
But seeing that, but when you see that expression between the mother and the newborn child, and then you compare it to something along the lines of a disordered type condition where you have like postpartum depression and
right?
things like this. Obviously, there's not enough time to roll into things like that. But I do, and this is my personal opinion here, that because of all of the stories of postpartum depression, those stories get elevated much more, just like the negative things in the world get elevated much more. That is leading to a cyclical nature of
Right,
dread when it comes to potential motherhood,
right.
at least with most modern women. And it's a perpetuate self perpetuating cycle of dread that seems to spread, which makes the idea of abortion and contraception seem much more attractive because it's painted in a light of true marketing campaigns of
Right.
being much better and an escape from possible death and depression and all these things.
Abortion is my God. It saved my life, right? I mean, abortion made me able to pack all this stuff away and just be able to forget about it. And Jeff, when do women get postpartum depression? When they go back on their contraceptives.
Yeah, see, this is why we have to have him on again, Ed, because we could go probably another 3 hours on this. But we've got 5 minutes left in the show. One of the things that we always do is we go into Ed's archive and check out what he's got from his collection of thousands of pieces of church history. But I don't want to cut him short. So we'll jump on that tomorrow for everybody watching and listening. But we will jump into the saint of the day, and I'll run through it real quick. The saint of the day is Saint Augustine of Canterbury, not to be confused with Saint Augustine. But in the year 596, some 40 monks set out from Rome to evangelize the Anglo-Saxons in England, and leading the group was Augustine, who was a prior of their monastery. Men had barely reached Gaul when they heard the stories of the ferocity of the Anglo-Saxons and the waters of the English Channel. So he returned to Rome to Gregory the Great, and he said, "No, no, no, your fears are groundless." Well, they weren't so groundless, but by the time they reached the English Channel, hit the territory of Kent, ruled by King Ethelbert at the time, who was a pagan, married to a Christian. He did receive them kindly, and he set up a residence for them in Canterbury. And within a year, on Pentecost Sunday in 597, he was himself baptized. And then, after being consecrated a bishop in France, Augustine returned to Canterbury, where he founded his see. And he constructed a church and monastery near where the present cathedral that began construction in 1070 now stands. So he was one of those that had to brave the terrifying environment of, oh, you're a Christian? Let me chop you up with an axe and offer you over to Odin or whatever pagan gods were worshipped by the Gauls. So, again, today's saint of the day, Saint Augustine of Canterbury. I would have gone much more into depth about his story, but we're running up on the hour, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity to thank Dr. Dominic Pedulla for coming to the show, sharing his expertise, and we're definitely going to have you back on again because I know I do, and I know Ed does have so many more questions we want to ask you. So
Absolutely.
you may have to make a an installment of appearances.
Okay, no worries. I'm so honored. You guys are the
Okay,
new Bishop Folk Machine. You guys are the
Oh
new Folk
no, no,
Machine.
we're not.
Yes, you are.
We
You
are
just better
not.
start owning it one of these days. No one will listen to that stuff today. They'll listen to you. Anyway, thank you very much.
Uh,
I'm very honored to be on your show.
yeah,
it was our pleasure,
we're
Doctor.
yeah, we're more than glad to have you, but we're now left with, same as our listeners, with more questions than answers, simply because there's so
Mhm.
much that you can cover. So we'll definitely be having you back on. And
Okay.
for those of you watching, for those of you listening, um, if you want to get any kind of messages to Dr. Padula with questions, you can email me, DM me on Twitter, whatever it is, comment on the YouTube video, and I will relay them to him. And lastly, if you haven't yet, on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store, download Holy Habits if you're looking for a easy to use habit tracker, and take use of the Holiness Hub if you're looking to instill more practices in your expression of faith and your devotion to God in your day without having to forget about it. And like the app says, sanctity is for everyone. We're just lucky enough to have the blessed Carlo Acutis on the path to canonization now. And if he can become a saint, you can become a saint, I can become a saint. But thank you all for watching. Special thanks to my co host, Ed, who I did not get to mention his age but once today. And of course, a special thank you to Dr. Dominic Pedulla. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow.